Hi, Jambo. Thanks for coming back for Chapter 10. Take odd jobs. All right, now, in life, you will have some great jobs. You'll have some terrible jobs. You'll have some weird jobs. You'll have some jobs that scare the heck out of you. You'll have jobs that bore you, but take them. Find your path. And don't forget, you're going to one day have a terrific resume to put it all down. All right? Okay, before we get started today, don't forget to follow me on Jambo Mama at Instagram and Facebook. Don't forget to subscribe by clicking on the red bell at my YouTube channel, Mama Sarah's Story Time. Don't forget to check out the book on Amazon.com. And don't forget to just have a great week as soon as you're done doing this, okay? Alrighty, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, Mama Sarah says, put it in your resume. This is Chapter 10, Take Odd Jobs. Now, fortunately, the girls' school that I told you about in the last chapter was not my only experience as a student in Kenya. It wasn't easy, but my mother managed to dig up a couple of strangely edifying jobs that I'll never forget. I wish I'd thought to put them in my pre-credential resume. Residing in Kenya didn't elicit images of the typical American kid's idea of making bucks, babysitting, mowing lawns, or walking dogs. So I started asking around, putting out feelers with my parents' friends as to my availability, but I got no bites. My mother, not about to let me think that monetary payment was the only form of reward, assigned me to a very unusual job, chimp coach. And here I am in my role as chimp coach with sweet little Hugo. Next to me is the picture of my brother with that evil baboon. All right, I went to spend the week with the Harthorn family, the most interesting family in the world. They had 2 kids about the same age as Adam and me, but we were much more interested in the other animals that lived with them, the wilder ones. Sue and Tony Harthorn were big animal veterinarians. The television show Daktari was based on the lives of Tony and one of his friends, the game warden of the Nairobi National Game Reserve. These guys were, in Adam's and my minds, the coolest family this side of Mars. We had both been a fan of the TV show before we learned that we were off to live there. We could not believe our luck when Mom and Dad took the job that made us their Rafikis. The show must have kept Tony pretty busy because in all the 4 years I hung out there, I think I saw him only once or twice. But Sue was there, and the house was always filled with Peace Corps volunteers, other scientists, and many locals who helped out when needed. Their home was not very far from town. The backyard looked over the Nairobi River. The first time I visited the house, I was taken there on the pretext of meeting the family. It was actually set up to meet Hugo, the baby chimp. They had invited Mom and me to tea. When we knocked on the door, a houseman ushered us out to the veranda. He shoved the teacup into my hands just as I stepped through the door. It was the perfect way to meet a chimp, hands occupied and totally caught off guard. Before I knew what was going on, a wee chimpanzee had scaled my left leg, attached his hind legs around my waist, and was planting lippy, wet kisses all over my face. It was like being chewed, but not eaten. I think. Ee, and ooh, don't cut it when trying to relay the sounds of chimp speak. But it's easy to imagine you speak it too. So I decided to cooperate, knowing from the treetops adventure that I didn't have a choice in the matter. So I simply stood my ground and chattered right back at him. I thought to myself, yes, a test of my fortitude. Mom had forewarned me that there could be some real experience tryouts, so I figured this was it. Hugo grabbed the teacup from my hands and launched it across the room, shattering it everywhere. Sue looked at him very disappointedly, and he dropped his head, climbed down my tree trunk body, and put his hands up to Sue. Mama, an apologetic chimp. I noticed my mother seemed to be having more fun than anyone, even Hugo. I realized she was happy for her daughter to be experiencing meeting a chimp. The 2 of us got to sit quietly with Hugo for a few minutes at most in a primal tete-a-tete. Sue and Mom explained to me that my mission would be to teach Hugo to hang on to me. It seemed like a job for which I was well qualified, having been a climber in my past life, and Hugo was already attached to my leg, so I accepted. I was in love. Poor little Hugo was one of the consequences of people who mean well but do stupid things anyway. Someone found him motherless, which may or may not have been true, somewhere in the bush, and brought him to Nairobi. Probably the same family that brought home the cute little lion cub that later ate them in their sleep, declared Sue. The Harthorns knew he didn't have a chance at survival, but because Hugo was now theirs, decided the best they could do was to be a chimp with him. My week with Hugo made me very aware of the fact that not all animals mix well with each other. Our human hide just isn't thick enough. Getting a baby chimp to hang on to you no matter what is not as easy as it sounds. I was supposed to be quite literal in my interpretation of no matter what, but there was no way I could ever give him the kind of jumping he could or would do in the wild. So I became a tree, a passive, solid, stoic tree, gradually losing its bark. My little baby chimp had at me all day long, wiggling, picking, poking, jumping, clinging, scratching, screaming, hanging all over my tree self. He pulled my hair, pried open my ears and eyes, and stuffed things into my mouth. He chattered away at me, stretching his lips right over his teeth, smiling. He stole my food, as if I didn't need to eat like he did. I had to hide in the kitchen when Hugo was caged to be able to eat. My first diet, chimp imposed. He was not a very considerate baby. Wild thing. By the end of the week, I was completely exhausted. Bringing up Hugo was not to be for me, but at least now I knew it firsthand. After my mission, I did get to see Hugo one more time. I think he remembered me. He climbed right up into my arms and smiled. He smacked a final wet kiss on my cheek and went off again. And I chose not to get more news of Hugo. I skipped over the Hugo chapters in Sue's book. I am certain his story ended eventually, very sadly. Poor Mtoto, poor child. Now the Harthorns gave me another unique opportunity when I was a guest in their home at the same time as a young cheetah. He wasn't fully mature yet, but even so, he was almost 4 feet long without his tail, and he was about 2 feet tall at his shoulder. When I met him, he was contained in a cage big enough for him to pace in a small circle. He did that endlessly until he slept at night, I guess. I don't remember how he landed himself in the Harthorn's care, but my personal mission instantly became to keep him company all day long. I felt terribly sorry for him. I thought if we were going to remove his freedom, the very least I could do was keep him company, as if he wanted it. He snarled at me constantly. I was mostly just threatening him, but I didn't know that. I was fascinated by his voice. Duma had a squeaky voice when passive and a sharper sound for urgent. His growl was that of a cross between like a lynx and a small dog. His snarl, however, was all cat, big cat. My secret plan was to make myself familiar and appear to be a good stranger. Of course, this dreamy notion had been developed over years of secretly wanting a pet cheetah. I figured this was about as close as I would get to sharing anything with a big cat, so down I sat next to his cage. I parked myself there every morning. They had to lure me in with dinner at nighttime. One day, the gardeners decided to burn off the long grasses in the yard behind the house. There was a steep hill which rose from the banks of the Nairobi River. It was a windy day, like most days. Within just seconds of throwing the match into the grasses, the entire yard burned off, moved south, and began burning off the neighbor's yard, too. Somewhere in the melee, the cheetah's cage was left unlocked. Poor Duma became distressed with the smoke and the noise, and he started spinning in circles within it. That movement knocked the cage over, its door opened, and out he went, bolted, shot a black-yellow streak. Voices that had moments before been shouting, "Hatari, moto, moto, danger, fire, fire," were now yelling, "Hatari, Duma, 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 danger, cheetah, cheetah. Duma went the only way he could, to the river. He was flanked by fire on two sides and water on the other. One voice rose above the others to take command. He's going to the river, Mama Sue hollered. Kucha, Kucha, come, come. Everyone ran back up to the porch where Mama was handing out the protective gear. 6 large Kikuyu men, the gardeners, and a few others were put into leather gauntlets and chaps. They looked well covered, but after realizing what they were about to do, I thought the addition of headgear would be better. Once geared up, the 6 men resignedly trudged down to the river. Into the burning grasses and hovering smoke they disappeared. They found poor Duma easily. He'd tucked himself under the embankment. We heard the men's boots in the squishy mud. We heard them grunt and shout with effort, and we heard desperate yowls from poor Duma. The river grasses leapt about, brown flames in a dry fire, throwing out bits of dust and hair and dirt. And when they reappeared from the hillside, everyone's hair stood on end, and all the men's eyebrows were missing. The smell of burning hair was everywhere. However, they had a firm hold of poor Duma, who wasn't going anywhere and had almost accepted it. One man was on each of his legs, one was on his tail, and one really lucky guy was on his head. Poor Duma was a force to be reckoned with, but the 6 men won out. They wrestled him back to his cage while the rest of the household put out the fire they'd started. With a sigh and a tepid harambe, we all collapsed. The smell of the fire remained, but otherwise the world had returned to its sleepy self. Poor Duma and I spent the remainder of the day together, lowering our blood pressure. He didn't snarl at me even once after that. Okay, before we go on to the next 2 jobs, you must have a dinner break because you know you have to pace yourself. When you work, take a little break and then work a little bit more and then have another break. Okay? So I'm not even going to sign out yet because you've got one more video to follow this one. I will leave you with the music of Chris Mickey, $11 bills.
You only got 2. I need a $50 bill. You only got 2. I wanna play